The first contact came on a Tuesday morning when Dr. Sarah Chen was drinking her third cup of coffee in the linguistics lab at MIT. The massive ships appeared over every major city on Earth simultaneously, blocking out the sun with their dark metal hulls that stretched for kilometers. Humanity held its breath, waiting for first contact with an alien civilization. What they got instead was laughter. The aliens, who called themselves the Kethvar, made their intentions clear through crude pictographs projected onto every screen on Earth. They weren't here to destroy humanity or enslave them. They were here to study the primitive monkey creatures that had somehow managed to crawl out of their caves and play with fire. Sarah watched in horror as the alien broadcasts showed Kethvar scientists pointing at humans through their observation devices. Their angular faces twisted in what could only be described as amusement. The pictographs were simple enough for even children to understand. Humans were nothing more than an interesting zoo exhibit to these beings. The Kethvar had been watching Earth for centuries, the broadcasts revealed. They had observed humanity's wars, its struggles with disease and famine, its slow technological progress. To them, humans were barely above the level of the great apes that still swung through Earth's remaining forests. The fact that humanity had developed nuclear weapons and space travel was seen as nothing more than monkeys learning new tricks. Look at them, the alien broadcasts seemed to say through their crude visual language. They fight over resources when the universe is infinite. They poison their own world while dreaming of reaching the stars. They create weapons of mass destruction and point them at their own species. How amusing. The Kethvar established massive research stations in Earth's orbit, their ships bristling with advanced technology that made humanity's greatest achievements look like stone tools. They began conducting experiments on human civilization, studying how humans would react to various stimuli. Sometimes they would cause all electronic devices in a major city to stop working for exactly 1 hour, watching as millions of humans panicked and scrambled like ants whose hill had been kicked. Other times, they would project false images in the sky, showing impossible geometric patterns or representations of human historical figures, just to observe how different cultures would interpret these visions. Each experiment was accompanied by what the humans soon learned to recognize as Kethvar laughter, a series of harmonic frequencies that resonated through their ships and into Earth's atmosphere. The sound was beautiful and terrifying, like wind chimes made of crystal that sang of superiority and contempt. Sarah Chen had dedicated her life to studying human languages, but now she found herself obsessed with a different kind of communication. The Kethvar had their own language, far more complex than the simple pictographs they used to communicate with humans. Sarah caught glimpses of it in their broadcasts, when the aliens spoke among themselves, without bothering to translate for their human subjects. The Kethvar language was unlike anything in human linguistics. It seemed to combine visual elements, harmonic frequencies, and even electromagnetic patterns into a unified system of communication. Traditional human approaches to language translation were completely useless when faced with this alien complexity. While world governments scrambled to respond to the Kethvar presence, military leaders planned futile resistance strategies, and religious groups declared the end times. Sarah quietly assembled a team of the world's most brilliant linguists, mathematicians, physicists, and computer scientists. They worked in secret, knowing that if the aliens discovered their true purpose, they might end the experiment early. The team included Dr. Marcus Webb, a mathematician who had developed new theories about pattern recognition in complex systems. Dr. Yuki Tanaka brought her expertise in quantum computing and signal processing. Dr. Ahmed Hassan contributed his knowledge of ancient human languages and symbolic systems. Dr. Elena Petrov added her understanding of acoustic linguistics and sound wave analysis. Working out of a converted warehouse in Boston, the team called themselves the Babel Project. Their goal was simple in concept but impossibly complex in execution: decode the Kethvar language completely and learn what the aliens really thought about humanity. The first breakthrough came 3 months after the alien arrival. Dr. Tanaka's quantum computers identified repeating patterns in the Kethvar electromagnetic communications. What initially appeared to be random noise contained structured information, like a carrier wave that transported meaning through variations in frequency and amplitude. "It's like they're thinking in mathematics," Dr. Webb explained to the team during one of their late-night sessions. "Every concept seems to have a precise mathematical relationship to every other concept. Their language isn't just describing reality, it's calculating it. As weeks turned into months, the Kethvar continued their experiments on humanity. They would occasionally abduct individual humans, not for medical procedures, but to observe human behavior in controlled environments. These humans were always returned within 24 hours, completely unharmed but with no memory of their experience. The aliens seemed particularly fascinated by human creativity and emotional responses. They would present humans with impossible puzzles and watch how different individuals approached the problems. They studied human art, music, and literature with the same clinical detachment that human scientists might show when observing the social behavior of dolphins. Sarah's team worked frantically to decode more of the alien communications. They discovered that the Kethvar language had layers upon layers of meaning. A single word in their language could simultaneously convey factual information, emotional context, mathematical relationships, and temporal references. It was as if they spoke in four-dimensional concepts that human brains were barely equipped to comprehend. Dr. Hassan made the next crucial discovery. While analyzing recordings of Kethvar communications during their experiments on human cities, he noticed that certain electromagnetic patterns seemed to correspond to specific human behaviors. The aliens weren't just talking about what they observed, they were predicting human responses with mathematical precision. "They've been modeling us," Dr. Hassan told the team, his voice filled with excitement and dread. "They've created a mathematical model of human behavior that's so accurate they can predict what we'll do before we do it. That's why their experiments are so precisely timed. They know exactly how we'll react." The team realized they were racing against time in more ways than one. The Kethvar experiments were becoming more elaborate and potentially dangerous. Recently, they had begun testing human responses to simulated natural disasters, projecting false images of tsunamis and earthquakes to observe panic responses. How long before they decided to create real disasters for the sake of their research? But progress on the language translation was accelerating. Dr. Petrov's analysis of the harmonic frequencies revealed that the Kethvar could communicate concepts that had no equivalent in human language. They had specific words for the feeling of mathematical certainty, for the satisfaction of observing a perfectly predicted outcome, for the aesthetic pleasure of contemplating infinite series. More disturbing were the concepts they had for different types of inferior beings. The team discovered that the Kethvar had an elaborate classification system for primitive species. Humans ranked somewhere between amusing tool users and potential simulation subjects, with the clear implication that there were many levels of intelligence above and below humanity in the galactic community. Sarah spent sleepless nights listening to recordings of Kethvar communications, her mind struggling to process the alien concepts. She began to understand that the Kethvar saw the universe in terms of mathematical perfection. To them, intelligence was measured by the ability to perceive and manipulate the underlying mathematical structures of reality. Humanity's chaotic, emotional, seemingly irrational behavior was endlessly fascinating to them precisely because it seemed to violate mathematical prediction models. How could beings capable of mathematics and science also be capable of falling in love, creating art for its own sake, or sacrificing themselves for abstract principles? The Kethvar broadcasts began including more sophisticated experiments. They created holographic scenarios where humans had to choose between personal survival and the welfare of strangers. They presented moral dilemmas with no clear mathematical solutions. They seemed to be testing whether human behavior could ever truly be reduced to predictable formulas. Dr. Webb made a startling discovery while analyzing the mathematical structures embedded in Kethvar communications. The aliens weren't just using mathematics to describe their observations. They were using mathematics to justify their actions. Their entire ethical system seemed to be based on mathematical principles that humans were only beginning to glimpse. They believe they're morally superior because their logic is mathematically pure, Dr. Webb explained. To them, emotions and irrational behavior aren't just primitive. They're ethically wrong because they violate mathematical truth. As the team delved deeper into the alien language, they began to uncover something unexpected. Despite their advanced technology and mathematical sophistication, the Kethvar communications revealed a species that had become intellectually stagnant. Their perfect mathematical logic had led them to a universe where everything was predictable and therefore boring. Humanity's unpredictability wasn't just scientifically interesting to them. It was the first thing they had encountered in millennia that their mathematical models couldn't completely explain. In their own language, they had begun referring to humans as chaos generators and calculation breakers. Sarah realized that the team was close to a complete translation matrix for the Kethvar language. Once they could fully understand alien communications, they would know everything the Kethvar really thought about humanity and their plans for Earth. But time was running out. The alien experiments were becoming more invasive, and there were signs that the Kethvar were preparing for the next phase of their research. Sarah's team had intercepted communications suggesting that the aliens were planning something they called controlled chaos introduction. Whatever that meant, it sounded ominous for humanity. The breakthrough came on a rainy night in November, 6 months after first contact. Dr. Tanaka's quantum computers finally cracked the final layer of the Kethvar linguistic matrix. For the first time, humans could understand exactly what their alien observers were saying about them. Sarah sat alone in the laboratory, headphones on, listening to real-time Kethvar communications as they discussed their latest observations of human behavior. For the first time, she could understand every word, every nuance, every mathematical concept embedded in their speech. What she heard made her blood run cold. Sarah Chen sat frozen in her chair, the translated Kethvar communications flowing through her headphones like ice water through her veins. She had expected to hear clinical discussions about human behavior, mathematical analysis of their experiments, perhaps even cruel jokes at humanity's expense. Instead, she was listening to something far more disturbing. The chaos pattern emanations from species Category 7 continue to destabilize our predictive matrices, one Kethvar scientist was saying to another. Initial projections suggested 3.72 cycles of observation would yield complete behavioral mapping. Current projections indicate mathematical impossibility of complete mapping. Clarification requested, responded the second voice. Mathematical impossibility constitutes fundamental error in universal constants. Are you suggesting species Category 7 violates mathematical truth? Negative. Suggesting species Category 7 operates on mathematical principles beyond our current comprehension matrix. Their chaos patterns follow rules we cannot perceive. Sarah's hands trembled as she took notes. The Kethvar weren't just studying humanity because they found them amusing. They were studying humans because human behavior was breaking their understanding of how the universe worked. Status report on controlled chaos introduction experiment? The first voice continued. Preparation phase 73% complete. Species category. 7 subjects have been selected for direct mathematics chaos interface. Expected outcome: either species elevation to Category 4 or complete psychological dissolution. Dr. Webb burst into the laboratory just as Sarah was processing this terrifying revelation. Sarah, we've got a problem. The Kethvar are moving 12 of their research vessels into position around major population centers. They're about to... I know, Sarah interrupted, pulling off her headphones. They're about to test whether humans can handle direct exposure to their mathematical way of thinking. They think it will either elevate us to their level of intelligence or drive us completely insane. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Sarah's team worked around the clock to decode more Kethvar communications. Desperate to understand the full scope of the upcoming experiment, what they discovered was both terrifying and oddly hopeful. The Kethvar had been searching the galaxy for millennia, looking for another species capable of what they called structured chaos thinking. They had found countless civilizations that could master mathematics and logic, but every single one eventually reached the same endpoint: perfect mathematical understanding that led to complete stagnation. The Kethvar themselves were trapped in this state. They knew everything that could be known about their universe through mathematical analysis, which meant they knew everything that would happen next. They existed in a state of perfect, boring predictability. Humanity was the first species they had encountered that seemed capable of combining mathematical thinking with something they couldn't model: creative chaos, emotional logic, and intuitive leaps that somehow arrived at correct conclusions through completely irrational processes. They're desperate, Dr. Hassan realized as he read through Sarah's translations. They've been stagnant for so long that our unpredictability is literally the only interesting thing in their universe. But they don't know how to study us without potentially destroying what makes us unique. The controlled chaos introduction experiment was their attempt to solve this problem. They would expose selected humans to their pure mathematical language, hoping to create hybrid beings capable of both perfect logic and creative chaos. If it worked, these enhanced humans would become the Kethvar's bridge to a new kind of thinking. If it failed, the test subjects would either die or lose their minds. Dr. Petrov discovered something crucial while analyzing the aliens' preparation communications. The Kethvar had selected their test subjects based on specific criteria: high intelligence, creative problem-solving abilities, and strong emotional stability. By pure coincidence, Sarah's entire team matched the profile perfectly. "We're on the list, Doctor," Petrov announced grimly. "All of us. They've been monitoring our work on their language, and they think we're perfect candidates for direct mathematical interface." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but then something else occurred to her. If the Kethvar thought her team was ready for direct mathematical interface, then her team might already be closer to understanding alien logic than the Kethvar realized. "What if we beat them to it?" Sarah suggested. "What if we voluntarily interface with their mathematical language before they force it on us? If we can maintain our humanity while gaining their level of mathematical understanding, we might be able to communicate with them as equals, instead of test subjects." The idea was incredibly dangerous. The Kethvar communications made it clear that most species exposed to pure mathematical thinking either died immediately or lost all emotional and creative capacity, becoming perfect logical beings trapped in endless predictive cycles. But Sarah's team had one advantage the Kethvar didn't know about. They had been gradually exposing themselves to increasing levels of alien mathematical concepts for months. Their minds had already begun adapting to think in ways that bridged human intuition and Kethvar logic. Dr. Webb ran calculations on their quantum computers, trying to model the probability of success. "The mathematics are inconclusive," he reported, "which, given what we know about Kethvar predictive capabilities, might actually be a good sign. If our actions are mathematically unpredictable, we might be operating in exactly the kind of chaos space that confuses them." The team had less than 48 hours before the Kethvar experiment would begin. They decided to attempt their own version of controlled mathematical interface, using the translation matrix they had developed to gradually expose themselves to increasingly complex Kethvar concepts. The process was unlike anything in human experience. As Sarah allowed the alien mathematical language to flow through her consciousness, she felt her perception of reality shifting and expanding. She began to see the mathematical structures underlying physical laws, the precise equations that governed particle interactions, the elegant formulas that described stellar formation. But unlike pure Kethvar thinking, Sarah retained her human emotional responses to this knowledge. The beauty of mathematical truth didn't eliminate her capacity for wonder. It enhanced it. She could perceive the universe's logical structure while still feeling awe at its complexity and mystery. Dr. Webb experienced something similar but different. His mathematical intuition expanded exponentially, allowing him to perceive mathematical relationships that would have taken years to calculate consciously. But his human creativity allowed him to imagine new applications for these relationships that pure logic would never consider. Each team member's experience was unique, shaped by their individual human perspectives and personalities. Dr. Tanaka found herself able to visualize quantum probability clouds directly, while still maintaining her distinctly human sense of humor about the absurdity of quantum mechanics. Dr. Hassan discovered he could understand the mathematical principles underlying language evolution, while retaining his appreciation for the emotional poetry found in human communication. Most remarkably, Dr. Petrov found that her expanded mathematical awareness actually enhanced her ability to appreciate music and art. She could perceive the mathematical patterns in symphonies and paintings, while simultaneously experiencing the emotional impact these works had on her humanity. The team realized they had achieved something the Kethvar thought was impossible. True hybrid thinking that combined mathematical perfection with creative chaos. They were no longer purely human, but they weren't Kethvar either. They had become something new. More importantly, they had gained the ability to understand Kethvar communications at levels the aliens never intended. Sarah could now perceive not just the literal meaning of alien messages, but the mathematical assumptions and logical frameworks underlying their entire worldview. What she discovered changed everything she thought she knew about the alien invasion. The Kethvar weren't studying humanity out of cruel amusement. They were studying humanity out of desperate need. Their perfect mathematical civilization was dying of its own success. They had eliminated all sources of genuine surprise, discovery, or growth from their existence. They faced a choice between eternal stagnation and finding a way to reintroduce controlled chaos into their thinking. But there was more. The Kethvar had tried this experiment before, with hundreds of other species across the galaxy. Every single attempt had failed. They had either destroyed the chaos-generating species through their experiments, or successfully converted them into mathematical beings who lost their capacity for creative thinking. Humanity was their last hope. The communications Sarah intercepted revealed that the Kethvar leadership was divided about the upcoming experiment. One faction wanted to proceed carefully, taking decades to gradually expose humans to mathematical thinking. Another faction argued they had already wasted too much time and risked losing humanity to natural mathematical evolution, which would eliminate their creative chaos naturally. A third faction, small but growing, argued that the experiment was fundamentally flawed. They believed that chaos and mathematics couldn't be combined artificially, that the attempt would either fail completely or create beings so alien that neither humans nor Kethvar could relate to them. Sarah realized that her team might represent a fourth possibility the Kethvar had never considered: voluntary hybrid evolution guided by human choice, rather than alien manipulation. The question was whether they could convince the Kethvar to listen before the experiment destroyed the very qualities that made humanity valuable. Dr. Webb made a startling discovery while analyzing Kethvar technological communications with his enhanced mathematical perception. The aliens' technology wasn't just advanced, it was fundamentally limited by their purely logical thinking. They could build anything that could be mathematically modeled, but they couldn't innovate beyond the boundaries of their logical frameworks. Their ships, their computers, their entire technological infrastructure is based on mathematical optimization, Dr. Webb explained. But optimization requires knowing what you're optimizing for. They've optimized for mathematical perfection, which means they can't develop technology for purposes they can't mathematically define. This revelation opened up incredible possibilities. Human creative chaos could potentially solve technological problems that Kethvar mathematical logic couldn't even perceive. The combination of human intuition and Kethvar mathematics might lead to breakthroughs that neither species could achieve alone. But first, they had to survive the next 24 hours. The Kethvar experiment was set to begin simultaneously across 12 major cities. Selected humans would be exposed to direct mathematical interface through devices that would be deployed from the alien research vessels. The communications suggested that the aliens expected a 90% failure rate, with most subjects either dying or losing their sanity. Sarah's team faced a choice that would determine not just their own fate, but potentially the future of both species. They could remain hidden and hope to survive the experiment, or they could reveal themselves to the Kethvar and try to demonstrate that voluntary hybrid evolution was possible. The decision was unanimous. As dawn broke over Boston, Sarah Chen prepared to broadcast a message to the Kethvar research vessels in their own language, using mathematical concepts that no human should have been able to understand. "Attention Kethvar research entities," she began. Her words carried on electromagnetic frequencies that resonated with the alien ships above. "We are species category 7 individuals who have achieved voluntary mathematical chaos interface. We request immediate communication concerning modification of pending experiment parameters." The response from the alien vessels was immediate and unmistakable. Absolute silence. Every Kethvar communication channel went quiet for the first time since their arrival on Earth. Sarah had just accomplished something the aliens thought was mathematically impossible, and they didn't know how to respond. The silence stretched across space like a held breath. For the first time in recorded Kethvar history, their predictive models had completely failed. According to every mathematical framework they possessed, what Sarah Chen had just accomplished was impossible. Inside the lead research vessel, First Calculator, Zeth Miran, stared at the communication display with something approaching panic. The mathematical interface readings were clear. A species category 7 being had just demonstrated perfect comprehension of high-order Kethvar mathematical concepts, while simultaneously maintaining chaos pattern brain activity. "Verification requested," Zeth Miran commanded his subordinates. "Has translation error occurred in communication from planetary surface?" "Negative," First Calculator. "Translation matrices confirm accuracy." Species category 7. Entity demonstrates mathematical chaos, hybrid thinking. Current probability calculations indicate this outcome as mathematically impossible. Then our mathematics are incomplete, Zethmiran realized, the implications staggering him. For the first time in millions of cycles, the Kithvar faced evidence that their perfect logical system contained fundamental flaws. On Earth, Sarah felt the alien confusion through the electromagnetic frequencies surrounding their ships. The Kethvar were broadcasting frantic calculations, trying to model what they had just witnessed. Their communications revealed beings in the grip of something they had never experienced. Genuine surprise. "They don't know what to do with us, Doctor," Webb observed, monitoring the alien chatter with his enhanced perception. "Their entire worldview is built on the assumption that chaos and mathematical order are mutually exclusive. We've just proven their basic assumptions about reality are wrong." Sarah keyed her transmitter again, broadcasting on frequencies she now understood with perfect clarity. "Kethvar research entities, we propose immediate direct interface conference. We possess solutions to stagnation problems you have not considered." The response came not from the research vessels, but from the massive command ship that had remained hidden behind Earth's moon since the beginning of the invasion. The transmission carried the mathematical signature of ultimate authority within the Kethvar hierarchy. Species Category 7 Entity Designation Sarah Chen. You will report immediately to Command Vessel Terminus for analysis. Compliance is not optional. But Sarah had learned enough about Kethvar psychology to recognize opportunity in their demand. They weren't threatening her. They were desperate to understand how she had achieved the impossible. For beings who lived in a universe of complete predictability, encountering something truly unprecedented was intoxicating. "Negative," Sarah responded, causing another wave of confused chatter among the alien vessels. "We propose alternative. Kethvar delegation will meet with hybrid entities on planetary surface. Neutral location. Equal status communication protocols." The audacity of her counteroffer sent shockwaves through the Kethvar fleet. Species Category 7 beings didn't negotiate with their superiors. They certainly didn't demand equal status meetings. Yet here was a human who had achieved mathematical chaos hybrid thinking demanding to be treated as an equal. Dr. Hassan made a crucial observation while monitoring the alien communications. "They're arguing among themselves," he reported. "Half of them want to capture us for immediate study. The other half are arguing that we might be too valuable to risk damaging through forced experimentation." More importantly, a third faction was emerging among the Kethvar leadership. These aliens were suggesting something that would have been inconceivable just hours earlier. That perhaps the Kethvar could learn from humanity, rather than simply studying them. After 6 hours of intense debate broadcast across their communication networks, the Kethvar reached a decision that shocked even their own people. First Calculator Zethmiran would personally descend to Earth's surface for direct negotiation with the hybrid humans. The meeting took place in Central Park, with both sides taking elaborate precautions. The Kethvar brought shielding devices and medical monitoring equipment, while Sarah's team surrounded themselves with quantum computers and electromagnetic field generators they had built using their enhanced understanding of alien technology. Zethmiran emerged from his transport pod wearing an environmental suit that made him appear even more alien than his natural form. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, with elongated limbs and a triangular head that housed his massive brain. His skin had a metallic sheen that reflected the mathematical patterns constantly running through his consciousness. "Species Category 7 Entity, Sarah Chen," he began, his voice transmitted through harmonic frequencies that his suit translated into English. "You have accomplished mathematical impossibility. Explanation is required." Sarah smiled, a distinctly human expression that confused the alien observer. "First Calculator Zethmiran, your mathematics aren't wrong. They're just incomplete. You've been trying to understand the universe through logic alone, but reality operates on multiple levels simultaneously." She gestured to her team, each of whom was radiating the same impossible combination of mathematical order and creative chaos that had first attracted Kethvar attention. "We didn't abandon our humanity to gain mathematical understanding. We used our humanity to understand mathematics in ways you never considered." "Clarification requested," Zethmiran responded, his suit's harmonic translators struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in Kethvar language. "How does chaos thinking enhance mathematical comprehension?" Dr. Webb stepped forward, his enhanced perception allowing him to communicate directly with the alien's mathematical interface. "Your people have achieved perfect logical thinking, but logic alone cannot generate new ideas. You can only work with concepts that already exist within your mathematical frameworks. Human chaos thinking allows us to make intuitive leaps beyond existing frameworks, Dr. Tanaka added. We can imagine mathematical relationships that pure logic would never discover. Then use your analytical methods to verify and refine these ideas. Zeth Miran's environmental suit registered readings that indicated extreme cognitive activity. His brain was processing ideas that challenged millions of years of Kethvar intellectual development. You suggest that intentional illogical thinking enhances logical capabilities? We suggest that what you call illogical is actually a different kind of logic operating on levels your mathematics haven't learned to perceive, Sarah replied. Human emotions, creativity, and intuition follow patterns that are mathematically consistent, but only when viewed from perspectives your people have never considered. To demonstrate, Dr. Hassan began describing the mathematical principles underlying human poetry. He showed how meter, rhythm, and rhyme schemes created predictable patterns, while emotional content and symbolic meaning operated on parallel mathematical structures that enhanced, rather than contradicted, the logical frameworks. Dr. Petrov followed by explaining how human music created mathematical harmonies that could be calculated precisely, while emotional responses to music followed quantum mechanical principles of probability and wave function collapse. The combination created artistic experiences that were simultaneously completely predictable and utterly surprising. Zeth Miran's readings were approaching levels that indicated system overload. These concepts require fundamental revision of universal mathematical constants, he transmitted, his harmonic voice showing signs of strain. If chaos patterns follow mathematical laws, then mathematics must include variables we have never identified. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Your people reached the limits of single-dimensional mathematical thinking. But reality operates in multiple dimensions, simultaneously. Mathematical truth, emotional truth, aesthetic truth, and creative truth are all aspects of the same underlying system. The implications were staggering. If humans could demonstrate hybrid thinking that enhanced rather than replaced pure logic, then the Kethvar could potentially escape their stagnation without losing their mathematical abilities. But Sarah had one more surprise for the alien delegation. We propose a partnership, she announced. Humans and Kethvar, working together to explore mathematical possibilities that neither species could discover alone. But the partnership must be between equals, not between experimenters and subjects. Zeth Miran's environmental suit registered readings equivalent to what humans might call shocked disbelief. Species Category 7 beings propose partnership with Category 1 civilization. Species designation categories are based on incomplete mathematical models, Dr. Webb pointed out. If your mathematics need revision, then your classification systems need revision as well. We propose new categories based on collaborative potential, rather than hierarchical superiority. Sarah began transmitting mathematical proofs that her team had developed using their hybrid thinking. These proofs solved problems that the Kethvar had been working on for millennia, using approaches that pure logic would never have discovered. The alien observer's readings indicated something approaching cognitive shock. Sarah's proofs were mathematically perfect, but they incorporated intuitive leaps and creative insights that violated every principle of Kethvar logical methodology. How is mathematical proof possible without complete logical derivation? Zeth Miran demanded. Because sometimes the shortest path between two logical points isn't a straight line, Sarah replied. Human intuition can perceive mathematical relationships directly, without having to calculate every step. Then, human creativity can imagine applications that pure logic would never consider. And to prove her point, Dr. Webb transmitted a series of technological innovations that their team had developed in the past few hours. Using hybrid mathematical chaos thinking, they had designed improvements to Kethvar technology that increased efficiency by orders of magnitude. More shocking still, they had also designed completely new categories of technology based on mathematical principles that the Kethvar had never discovered. These innovations used chaos mathematics to create systems that became more efficient as they encountered unexpected variables, rather than less efficient. Zeth Miran transmitted an emergency communication to the Kethvar fleet. Within minutes, every alien vessel was repositioning to optimal communication range with the surface meeting. The entire Kethvar expedition was realizing that they had discovered something far more valuable than an interesting test subject. They had discovered a species that could teach them how to grow again. Partnership terms require specification. Zeth finally transmitted after lengthy consultation with his superiors. What does species designation human propose? Sarah smiled again, this time with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. First, immediate cessation of all experimental activities on Earth. Second, formal recognition of human civilization as Category 1 partners, rather than Category 7 subjects. Third, establishment of joint research facilities where humans and Kethvar can work together to develop hybrid mathematical chaos technologies. Fourth, Dr. Hassan added, full cultural exchange programs so both species can learn from each other's perspectives on reality. Fifth, Dr. Petrov continued, collaborative exploration of the galaxy to find other species that might benefit from hybrid thinking approaches. And sixth, Sarah concluded, recognition that the universe is big enough for multiple approaches to truth, and that diversity of thinking is mathematically superior to uniformity of logic. The negotiation took 3 days. During that time, Sarah's team continued demonstrating impossible achievements that forced the Kethvar to completely revise their understanding of mathematics, logic, and intelligence. By the end of the 3rd day, the aliens who had arrived to study primitive monkey creatures found themselves signing formal treaties with equals, who had surpassed their teachers in ways they were still struggling to comprehend. The first joint human Kethvar research facility was established in orbit around Earth within 6 months. The second was built on Kethvar Prime within a year. Within 5 years, hybrid thinking had revolutionized both civilizations and opened up possibilities for technological and intellectual advancement that neither species could have imagined alone. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had taken their greatest weakness, their chaotic, emotional, seemingly irrational nature, and proven it was actually their greatest strength. They had transformed from subjects of an alien experiment into teachers who showed an ancient civilization how to grow again. The Kethvar had learned that perfection without growth was just another form of death. Humanity had learned that chaos without structure was just another form of stagnation. Together, they discovered that the universe was far stranger, more beautiful, and more full of possibility than either species had dreamed. And in research facilities across the galaxy, humans and aliens worked side by side, combining mathematical precision with creative chaos to unlock secrets that pure logic alone could never have revealed. The mocking had stopped. The real discovery had just begun. In the days following the Velkari defeat, Commander Zexhai found himself in an unprecedented situation. His ship remained in Earth's solar system not because of mechanical problems or navigational issues, but because he had become obsessed with understanding what he had witnessed. The impossible victory over the Raiders was just the beginning of a revelation that challenged everything he thought he knew about intelligence, civilization, and the nature of life itself. Dr. Sarah Chen had become his primary contact with human civilization, and their daily conversations had evolved far beyond the basic exchange of information. Through her, Zexhai was learning about a species that operated according to principles that seemed to contradict themselves at every level, yet somehow produced results that surpassed anything in galactic history. Dr. Chen, he said during their latest communication session, I've been studying your species' response to the recent crisis, and I need to understand something. How did your entire civilization coordinate such a complex defense with no central authority? Your planet has over 200 separate nations, many of which were actively fighting each other just hours before the attack. The human scientist smiled with what Zexhai had learned to recognize as genuine amusement. That's actually one of our strengths, Commander. When we have a common threat, we can set aside our differences remarkably quickly. The same competitive instincts that make us fight each other also make us incredibly effective at working together when we need to. But that makes no logical sense, Veltar interjected from his position at the communications console. Competitive instincts should make cooperation more difficult, not easier. Dr. Chen paused thoughtfully before responding. Think of it this way. We compete with each other constantly, which means we're always trying to be better, faster, and more innovative than our neighbors. When we suddenly have a common enemy, all of that competitive energy gets focused in the same direction, instead of being scattered across hundreds of different conflicts. Zexhai felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place in his mind. You're saying that your species' constant warfare actually serves as a form of training for larger conflicts? Not exactly training, Dr. Chen corrected. It's more like we're constantly stress testing our societies, technologies, and strategies against different types of challenges. Every conflict teaches us something new about problem solving under pressure. When a really serious threat appears, we have thousands of years of accumulated experience to draw from. The implications of this statement sent a chill through Zexhai's crystalline body. Every galactic civilization he knew of had eliminated warfare specifically because it was seen as wasteful and destructive. The idea that conflict might actually serve a useful purpose was heretical to everything he had been taught, but the evidence was undeniable. Humans had just defeated a force that should have crushed them effortlessly. Using tactics and technologies they had developed in a matter of hours, no peaceful species could have responded so quickly or effectively to such an unprecedented threat. "Commander," his sensor officer called out, "we're detecting new activity throughout the human solar system. It appears they're expanding their space-based infrastructure at an accelerated rate." Zexhai studied the incoming data with growing amazement. In just 5 days since the Valkyrie attack, humans had launched more spacecraft than they had built in their entire previous history. More remarkably, each new vessel incorporated design improvements based on lessons learned from the battle. "Dr. Chen," he said, "your species seems to be treating the recent conflict as a catalyst for technological advancement, rather than a traumatic event to recover from." "Well, yes," she replied, sounding slightly surprised by the question. "We learned a lot about space-based engineering and gravitational manipulation during the battle. It would be wasteful not to build on that knowledge while it's fresh in our minds. But don't your people need time to process the psychological trauma of facing potential extinction?" Dr. Chen looked genuinely confused for a moment. "Commander, I think there might be a fundamental difference in how our species process stress. For us, the best way to deal with a traumatic experience is usually to make sure it can't happen again. We feel safer when we're actively improving our capabilities than when we're just sitting around thinking about what went wrong." Zexhai exchanged glances with his crew. Korthani psychology was the exact opposite. When his people faced trauma, they required extended periods of reflection and emotional processing before they could function effectively again. The idea of using stress as motivation for increased activity seemed almost incomprehensible, yet it explained so much about human behavior that had puzzled him. "Dr. Chen, may I ask you a hypothetical question? If your species were to achieve faster-than-light travel and encountered a galactic civilization with thousands of peaceful worlds, how do you think humanity would integrate into such a community?" The human scientist was quiet for a long moment, and Zexhai could almost see her mind working through the implications of the question. "That's a fascinating scenario. Commander, I think we'd probably want to contribute somehow. We're not very good at sitting still and enjoying what we have. We tend to look for ways to improve things, even when they're already working well." "Improve things how?" "Well, if this galactic civilization has been peaceful for a long time, they might have become comfortable, safe. That's wonderful. But it might also mean they're not prepared for new types of challenges. We could help with that." Veltar made a sound of alarm from his station. "Commander, she's talking about deliberately destabilizing a peaceful galactic order." Dr. Chen's expression showed genuine concern. "Oh, I don't mean destabilizing in a destructive sense. I mean helping to strengthen it by identifying potential weaknesses and developing solutions before they become real problems. Think of it as preventive maintenance for a civilization." Zexhai felt his understanding of human nature take another quantum leap. They weren't just adapted to survive in conflict situations. They were psychologically driven to seek out and solve problems, even when no immediate threat existed. Where other species saw peace and stability as end goals, humans saw them as starting points for further improvement. "Commander," his tactical officer announced urgently, "long-range sensors are detecting another fleet approaching the system. Configuration suggests hegemony vessels, but they're still several days out." The galactic hegemony was the closest thing to a central government that existed among spacefaring civilizations. They were responsible for investigating incidents involving primitive species and first contact violations. Zexhai had known this moment would come eventually, but he still felt unprepared for the consequences of his decisions. "Dr. Chen," he said heavily, "I need to inform you that representatives of the galactic government are approaching your system. They'll want to investigate what happened here, and they may not be pleased with either of our actions." The human's response surprised him once again. Instead of showing fear or demanding protection, she simply nodded thoughtfully. How long do we have before they arrive? Approximately 4 days. That should be enough time to prepare a proper reception. Commander, would it be appropriate to invite them to visit Earth directly? We'd like to demonstrate that we can be good neighbors in the galactic community. Zexhai stared at the display in amazement. Any rational species would be terrified of judgment by a galactic tribunal. Humans wanted to throw them a party. Dr. Chen, you understand that they have the authority to quarantine your entire system if they determine that your species isn't ready for contact with galactic civilization. We understand the risks, she replied calmly, but we think they might be pleasantly surprised by what we have to offer. Besides, hiding from them won't improve our situation. Better to meet the challenge directly and see what happens. Over the next 4 days, Zexhai watched in fascination as human civilization prepared to meet their first official contact with galactic government. Instead of trying to appear more peaceful or advanced than they actually were, humans seemed determined to present themselves authentically while demonstrating their positive qualities. They organized scientific exchanges, cultural presentations, and technological demonstrations that showcased their rapid innovation and adaptive capabilities. Most remarkably, they coordinated this massive effort without any apparent central authority. As different nations and organizations voluntarily took responsibility for different aspects of the reception, when the hegemony fleet arrived, consisting of 3 massive diplomatic vessels, Zexhai found himself serving as an unofficial intermediary between 2 civilizations that operated according to completely different principles. Ambassador Korthmani, the senior hegemony representative, was a member of the Zephyrian species, known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and diplomatic skill. Their meeting with Dr. Chen and the other human representatives took place aboard Zexhai's ship as neutral ground. Dr. Chen, Ambassador Korthmani began in their melodious, translated voice. We've reviewed Commander Zexhai's reports regarding recent events in your system. While we appreciate that your species successfully defended itself against Velkari raiders, we're concerned about the implications of your tactical methods. How so, Ambassador? Dr. Chen replied respectfully. Your species demonstrated the ability to rapidly develop and deploy novel weapons technologies under extreme time pressure. This suggests a level of militaristic capability that typically indicates a species isn't ready for peaceful integration into galactic civilization. Zexhai watched the human scientist carefully, curious to see how she would respond to this fundamental challenge. The hegemony's concerns were logical from their perspective, but they didn't account for the unique nature of human psychology. Ambassador, Dr. Chen said thoughtfully, I understand your concerns, but I think there might be a misunderstanding about our motivations. We didn't develop those defensive capabilities because we enjoy warfare. We developed them because we desperately want to survive and thrive in a universe that includes both wonderful opportunities and terrible threats. Elaborate, please. Dr. Chen gestured toward a display showing images of Earth. Our planet has taught us that existence is fundamentally uncertain. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and dozens of potential extinction events throughout our evolution. We've learned that the price of survival is constant vigilance and the ability to adapt quickly to new challenges. Ambassador Korthmani's translator worked for several seconds before responding. You're suggesting that your apparent militarism is actually a survival adaptation rather than aggressive expansionism? Exactly. We don't fight because we want to conquer others. We fight because we're terrified of being conquered ourselves. But when we meet people who clearly don't want to hurt us, like Commander Zexhai, our first instinct is friendship and cooperation. Zexhai found himself nodding in agreement. Through all his interactions with humans, he had never detected any desire for conquest or domination. They were aggressive in defending themselves and competitive in their relationships with each other. But they showed genuine curiosity and respect toward beings they perceived as non-threatening. Furthermore, Dr. Chen continued, we believe our survival adaptations could actually benefit galactic civilization. The universe is a big, dangerous place. Sooner or later, you're going to encounter threats that peaceful diplomacy can't solve. When that happens, you might appreciate having allies who specialize in rapid problem-solving under pressure. Ambassador Korthmani was quiet for a long moment. Dr. Chen, you're essentially arguing that your species' apparent weaknesses are actually strengths that could complement the abilities of more peaceful civilizations. That's exactly what I'm arguing, Ambassador. We don't want to change galactic civilization or make it more violent. We want to help protect it so it can continue being peaceful and prosperous. Zexhai realized he was witnessing a pivotal moment in galactic history. For the first time, a species was requesting admission to galactic civilization not by demonstrating that they had eliminated their capacity for violence, but by arguing that their capacity for controlled violence was actually valuable. The ambassador spent several more hours interviewing human representatives, touring their facilities, and reviewing the technical data from the Velkari encounter. Finally, they called for a private conference with Zexhai. "Commander," Ambassador Korthmani said when they were alone, "your reports describe humans as a paradox that challenges our fundamental assumptions about the development of intelligent life. Based on my observations, I believe you're correct. What are your recommendations, Ambassador?" "These humans represent something entirely new in galactic history. Their psychological and cultural adaptations are unlike anything we've encountered before. They've achieved rapid technological advancement while maintaining social cohesion despite constant internal conflict. Most remarkably, they've demonstrated the ability to instantly unite against external threats while resuming competitive relationships once the threat is eliminated." The ambassador paused, their translucent features showing deep contemplation. "Commander, I believe we're looking at the next stage of galactic evolution. Our current civilizations have achieved peace and stability, but perhaps at the cost of adaptability and innovation. We've become very good at maintaining what we have, but we may have lost the ability to grow and change in response to new challenges. Are you suggesting that humans should be granted immediate membership in galactic civilization?" "I'm suggesting something much more significant," Ambassador Korthmani replied. "I believe humans represent a new model for how intelligent species can develop. Instead of requiring them to conform to our existing standards, we should study them and learn from their approach. They may be showing us how to be both peaceful and adaptive, cooperative and competitive, stable and innovative." Zexhai felt a profound shift in his understanding of the universe. "You think other species might benefit from adopting some human characteristics?" "I think the galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place, Commander, and I suspect that a few centuries from now, we'll look back on this first contact as the moment when galactic civilization began its next great phase of development." As Ambassador Korthmani departed to file their report with the Hegemony Council, Zexhai found himself contemplating a future that would have been unimaginable just weeks earlier. Humans would be granted provisional membership in galactic civilization. But more than that, they would serve as teachers and catalysts for changes that would transform every existing species. Dr. Chen's final message to him captured the essence of what made humans so remarkable. "Commander, thank you for giving us the chance to show what we could do. We're looking forward to meeting our new neighbors and finding out what challenges we can help each other overcome." As Zexhai finally set course for home, he carried with him the knowledge that he had witnessed the emergence of a species that would change the galaxy forever, not through conquest or destruction, but through their unshakable belief that every challenge was simply another problem waiting to be solved.